Matrix, William Miranda.
Mary A. Joyce has built a wide-ranging career in journalism and publishing. She has worked for two major metropolitan newspapers as a writer, columnist, artist, Sunday magazine editor, and feature editor. Alongside her newsroom work, she has written magazine articles and authored 5 additional books. She is currently serves as the editor for Skyships Over Cashiers, a website where she also works as an investigative reporter covering cutting-edge and unconventional topics. And I'd like to introduce to the Paradigm Matrix, Mary Joyce. How are you, Mary?
And it's good to see you again. It's been quite a while.
It's wonderful to have you here on the Paradigm Matrix. Thank you for being my special guest.
Thank you. I'll talk to your audience. Before we were going on the air, we were talking about the way NASA's gotten back into the picture again after the Artemis 2 went around the moon. And I lived down in Florida within shaking distance of the launch pad. While I was there, I got to meet an astronaut who shared a lot of secrets with me, which I now feel free to share because he's passed on. And I got to meet astronauts and different people who worked at NASA and learned a lot of things that I think will be new to most people, or almost all people.
Oh, that's fantastic. Please share the story.
Just go for it, huh? Okay.
Yes.
One of the things that stands out in my mind the most is when I first met an astronaut. And there were about 12 of us that were invited over to this little home, a bungalow home in Orlando, so that we could meet him. His name was Clark McClellan. He worked for NASA for over 30 years. He was a trained astronaut. He was an aerospace engineer, and he was the one who was a spacecraft operator. Now, what that means is he was at mission control, and because he had the astronaut training, if they had trouble in space, he would have a better idea of how he might be able to help because of his training. So that's the background on him. But when I got to meet him, he had just been fired by NASA. He was very upset. Not only did they fire him, they cut off all of his benefits, his retirement benefits, his health benefits, blackballed him for getting other jobs. And the reason was because he had seen something, which I will now tell you about, that he mentioned to somebody else who worked there. He was not supposed to talk about it, and that got him fired. And what he saw was he was at mission control, and he had these different monitors of what was going on in space or at the space shuttle. And he saw a tall alien between 8 and 9 feet tall in the open bay of the shuttle. And there were 2 astronauts who were also in space garb, but they were tethered so they wouldn't float away. The 3 of them seemed to be talking. He could not hear anything. And right next to the open bay of the shuttle was the craft that the spaceman had arrived in. That in itself is pretty incredible. But anyhow, that's what got him fired. And it was the first time he'd talked to anybody except maybe the few people that were really, really close to him. First time he had talked to anybody beyond his very small group of friends. And he was staying at the house of a woman who was a friend of his. And she really took him in after he'd been thrown to the curb by NASA. And he hadn't worked through any of this. And you could see him sweating, even though the place was air conditioned. And to make it even worse, his girlfriend was Judith Resnick, who was the one that was killed in the Challenger explosion just a few years before that. So everything in his life had been blown to smithereens, which explains why he was in such a state of mind. But I should add this, he wasn't the only one who saw this. And I'm going to quote somebody on this right now. Clark told me that about 2 months following his incident, he was informed by another report by another aerospace engineer who was also involved in launching space shuttles. He said this shuttle engineer observed a similar entity, 8 to 9 feet tall, inside the space shuttle crew compartment as it orbited Earth. It was slouched over to protect its head from hitting the shuttle overhead, and it was communicating with 2 much smaller NASA astronauts. Now, we've all seen what those compartments look like, and regular humans look like they're pretty snug in there. So imagine putting an 8 to 9 foot additional person into that compartment. So he had learned from another person that they had seen the same entity, I guess, or a similar one.
Has he fought for any of his benefits, or anything like that.
He never got any of his benefits. The end of his life was kind of sad. He died just a couple years ago.
That's so sad.
Yeah, I think he may have been able to get a job for a while as a bus driver or something, but to have so much experience and to have done so much and not to be able to, to
Yeah,
only
that's just
suffer from
awful.
it, that's just not right.
No, it isn't. It isn't. I know that in some cases, you probably heard of cases where people who have like in Area 51, remember the workers? They tried getting the workers at Area 51. They got sick. A lot of them got cancer because of, I guess they were burning a lot of the how would you say, a lot of the chemicals that were used
They'd
and
burn
things
them and
like
they'd
that.
breathe them in.
Yes, yes. I believe that was during the Clinton administration that several workers, ex-employees, have sued the government because they weren't getting any help.
They won't give out the help unless they're forced to, just
You know,
like our government won't tell the truth unless they're absolutely forced to. And so it
yes,
comes out in dribs and drabs.
that's right. That's
And
right.
people sit around waiting for the government to make this grand disclosure. The disclosure is coming from the bottom up. And the more people down at the bottom squawk and point and do all these different things, the more they're forced to expose. And there's so much that they have hidden from us. Some of it mystifies me. For example, I've done research on the giant skeletons that have been found in this country and other places also. There were so many of them that were found like in the 80s, and they were shipped off to the Smithsonian Institute, which you think of as a great research repository for all sorts of things.
Correct.
Those things disappeared. And so, for some reason, they're hiding the fact that we had giants that once lived in this country. Why they would want to hide that is just beyond me. That makes no sense to me at all.
I agree. I agree. And I was going to circle back and ask you about the current disclosure phenomenon that's going right now, which I find a whole bunch of nothing burger.
It's a nothing burger. They're just eking out a little bit. Anybody who's followed this subject, even a tiny bit, should be bored with it. And they're not even touching anything of significance, at least
Oh
not
no,
so far.
not at all. I mean, as a matter of fact, I was discussing this with my good friend Richards, who's the state director for MUFON, and he was saying, "There's nothing here." He's looking at. We're sharing photos back and forth, and I got some photos that are a hell of a lot better that were given to me by uh, some sources that I have that are a hell of a lot better than what is being showed right now. You know, and it's nothing. I mean, it's nothing that we haven't seen. Mary.
In fact, we've seen better than what I've been seeing on TV lately.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt.
Anyhow, I'm going to jump back. I'm jumping around. I don't think you mind.
Oh, no, no, no. Go ahead, go ahead.
Clark McClellan became really good friends with Werner von Braun. And as you know, Werner von Braun worked his way up all the way to the top of NASA. And they were friends between 1959 and 1966 for about 7 years. The two of them had a lot in common and really did become good friends. And when von Braun would come to the Florida Space Coast for conventions or meetings, which were often held at the beach hotels, the two of them would go out and sit under one of the umbrella tables or go out to the beach or something just so they could talk without being bothered. Also, von Braun was a smoker, so he liked to be outside and smoke his cigarettes. But he told Clark a whole lot of things. Some of it was about Mars. And the important thing to know is that everything he told Clark was no later than 1966. We never had a satellite going around Mars until Mariner 9, which was in 1971. So he's providing information that there was no known way that he could have known about what was happening there. Let me see here. I'm looking at something just to see what I need to tell you. Anyhow, let me get to some of this on what he said about Mars. I'm using my scroll technique too. All right, this is Clark, and he's quoting von Braun. He said von Braun thought he would eventually find evidence that life had evolved on the red planet hundreds of thousands of years ago. He even alluded to the possibility of discovering ancient ruins of buildings or technology on the planet's surface during future orbital, photographic, or manned Mars missions. He said he would not be surprised that some type of life was still surviving on or below the surface. Now, let me jump in here and stick this in the middle of this. There's a man, his name is Hyman Ashid, and he was the head of the Israeli Space Force for almost 30 years. To this day has an impeccable reputation. In December of 2020, he decided he was going to go public with some of the things he knew, and he gave information which was posted in the Jerusalem Post in December 2020. And I'm just going to read 2 sentences from his statement. He said there's an agreement between the U.S. government and the aliens. Second sentence, there's an underground base in the depths of Mars where the alien representatives are and also our American astronauts. So that's an indirect way of giving support to what von Braun was projecting for the future.
Of course. You know,
And he said that he...
and then you also have
let's
the
see.
faces in Mars.
I'm sorry?
And then you also have the faces in Mars.
Right, and that's really got people's attention. What's his name? Hoagland? Hoagland?
Yes, Richard
He's the
Hoagland.
one that got that out in the public and really got people looking for things of that nature. And I'm jumping all over. I apologize.
Oh,
I've
don't
done
worry, don't worry.
a book. It's called Spy in the Sky, and I've used Google Earth to explore the moon and the Earth and Mars. And I'm glad I did it some time ago because so many of these things have been wiped out. But I have found just a slew of things. And this is another thing that apparently the government doesn't want out there because my efforts to get that book out aren't working. I can only sell it myself through my website. I've just gotten blocks all the way. And one of the people who does remote viewing for one aspect of all this stuff said that they simply didn't want that information out yet, which I find interesting. So if anybody wants to get the information that they don't want you to have, go to my website, which is skyshipsovercashers.com. Cashiers is spelled like a cashier at the grocery store. Skyshipsovercashers.com. Go to Editor's Corner, and right at the top, it tells you how you can get the book. It's really a picture book for adults because I took photos or screenshots of everything. And it's a good thing that I did because so many things that I've found have later been airbrushed away or
Yes.
on the Earth and on the Moon and in Antarctica. And one of the most dramatic stories as far as a wipeout goes was I found 2 entrances into Antarctica, big enough that planes could fly into them. And I took screenshots of them and I posted them on the website, skyshipsovercashers.com. They were almost immediately blacked out, like somebody just poured black ink on them. I kept checking back on it. And for a very brief time, and I'm so glad I caught it, it said, there was a label on it. It said Hollow Earth Entrance. And then the other one said Hollow Earth Entrance 2. But those were there for just a very short amount of time. I feel very fortunate that I caught it. And after that, the whole area turned into a field of ice. So Google and the working in tandem with each other.
Of course, and that really happens because, as a matter of fact, I've seen some articles online were very interesting, and I have to send them to myself because if I go back, I learned my lesson. If I go back searching for that same article,
It'll be gone.
it'll be gone.
It'll be gone.
It'll be
And
completely
even that
gone.
article that I mentioned about Hyman Rashid in the Jerusalem Post, if you
Yes.
go back now, it's a shortened version of the original article, but I
Yeah.
still,
How
managed to
convenient,
save
huh?
the original.
How
So it's real
convenient.
important. And I'm guessing that everybody that watches you knows this, but I'm going to repeat it anyhow. Hit the control key and print screen. Anytime you see something very interesting that you think might be disappeared, make a screen copy of it and keep it in your files.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah,
hadn't done that,
that's what I've
I
been
couldn't have
doing.
proved an awful lot of things.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing. And going back to the Google Earth, I know that I had you probably 2 times when I was at KCOR, okay? And do you remember us talking about underground bases or underwater bases?
Well, I've done a book about it's almost out of print right now. There's very few left. It's about underground bases hidden in North Carolina mountains. We may have talked about
Yes,
that at some point.
yes, because I believe I got in one of your books, I have that also, and of course, there's been some reports of people seeing basically like doors open right into mountains, like
Yes.
huge openings, just,
And I've gotten reports from people who are very credible where the mountain looks just like a mountain,
yes.
but it is so well hidden, and then they've seen it open up. but then when the door is shut, you would never guess it was there. And that's
Correct.
true of Grandfather Mountain, which is a tourist place here in North Carolina. And it's true in the Linville Gorge, which is another area that tourists like to go to. A lot of these hidden things are on land or government-owned land.
Government-owned land, yes.
So I found them beneath the Smoky Mountain National Park, beneath Grandfather Mountain, beneath Chimney Rock, which is,
Mhm.
I think, a state park, but I guess it works in a pinch. But it's those kind of places where I guess they have more freedom to do some of the things they want to do.
Well, usually these things are in plain sight,
Right
right in
under your
plain
feet,
sight.
literally,
Yeah, you're
right under
correct.
your feet.
Correct, correct. As far as underwater bases are concerned too, I've had some guests that have spoken about underwater bases around the island of Puerto Rico where I'm from, and of course also out in the coast of California. Preston Bennett has written a few books concerning that. In those islands out in the west coast.
He's written quite a bit, actually.
Yes, yes, he has. He has. He's done some really, really good work also.
And another thing, using this spy in the sky with the Google Earth, I found many, many things in the shallow waters of the Pacific along the coast, all the way from, Alaska down to Baja. And the one that always stands out in my mind is there's one in the Bay of Baja, and it looks just like an airport runway system. In fact, in my book, I have a picture of it and a picture of an actual airport today. And the layout is,
Same.
just about the same. The big difference is everything I found on that coast was huge. The longest runways in this country today are not much more than 3 miles. This one was 89 miles,
Well,
but everything was huge. The Malibu structure that was found made the news a bunch of years ago. That's humongous. And it makes me think that there was a race of people at one time who were very large, who were maybe part of Lemuria, or perhaps they were the ones that came in from, well, let me read this to you. Let's see here. Okay, this is Clark talking about what von Braun had told him. The next theory he had, that Mars may have had an advanced civilization, technologically capable of space flight, that when it began to lose its atmosphere or faced destruction from the planet near Jupiter exploding, their having the capability of space flight allowed them to sustain their culture by actually coming to Earth. He said that at least some of those of our present human culture may be Martians. Now that's coming from von Braun. And, we have giants skeletons that have been found. We mentioned that a little bit earlier. You also get reports of the Martians being very large people. So maybe that culture was transferred from Mars to what would have been Lemuria at that time. Who knows?
well,
Whoever lived there, they were very large.
and going back to that subject, I don't know if you probably know this already, but there's more than 10,000 mounds in the United States, and a lot of them are in Ohio, the state of Ohio. So you have all these mounds.
Didn't know that. I knew that Ohio had a lot.
Yeah, they really are. As a matter of fact, my next guest is going to be Dennis Stone, American Stonehenge, and he's done a lot of work concerning a lot of that. So it's very interesting, as we call the ancient American history.
I hear you. But there's certainly a lot of mysteries for us still to explore.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, Mary. And it's interesting enough that you've been seeing this so-called disclosure that's been coming out. And your thoughts about it. Do you think it's a misdirection, Mary? As far as you're concerned, do you think that it's a misdirection in the government saying, "Hey, look over here," instead of or you think it's getting really, really, really difficult to really um, almost try to discredit a lot of this, with the advent of technology right now, with everybody with a cell phone, and a camera on it, and it works vice versa because you get the advent of AI. So
I
you
know,
really
it's making my
can't.
job a lot harder because you
Yes,
have to double check and triple check everything now, and
correct.
because you can get fooled, and you don't want to be fooled.
That's right.
Not when you're trying to really communicate something that you consider serious.
Yes, yes. And I go back. I really appreciate those old photos, like the Polaroids. Because you have that
Can't fake that one.
Polaroid, remember? You can't fake that one. You might be able to duplicate the smell. Remember the smell of that
Actually, I do, now that you mention it.
Yeah, you can still, it's still here, you know, you can
But it was
still,
like magic.
yes, it really was. You know, just watching it develop right in front of you, you know, which is,
For its
I mean,
time, it was very cutting edge.
that's right. That's right. And now it's not there anymore. The Polaroid is a plant down in not too far from Boston, and I go by it once in a while if I got to go out that way, and there's nothing left. I mean, nothing left of that facility. You know, it's not even there anymore.
If you live long enough, you get to see a lot of things come and go.
That's right. That is scary. That is scary. You know, I mean, you're absolutely right, Mary. That one hit home. That one hit home.
Okay, I'm going to drop back to some of the things that Clark told me,
Yes,
and it
sure, sure.
wasn't
Go right
just
ahead.
it wasn't just Werner von Braun that he became friends with. He got to know a lot of the other top tier Germans that were brought over during Operation Paperclip. I think everybody probably knows about it, but in a nutshell, it was the United States bringing over the top scientists, engineers, especially the space engineers, to the United States. It was called Project Paperclip, and over 1,600 Germans were brought over during that program. So he got to meet some of those at NASA. And I think I just have three things here that stand out in my mind from what he said. One quote, several Germans I worked with were very open with me. They said that Hitler and Eva did not die in the bunker, that history teaches us as fact. He'd had a doppelganger twin take his place. I think many people have heard that. Second thing he said was, they said these escaping Germans and Hitler were taken to what is called Shangri-La of the Fuhrer Hitler. It was a base built for Hitler under the Antarctic ice cover. Last sentence, and this I think will surprise many people. Later, I discovered through other German scientists that the V7 was the code name for a German saucer-shaped craft that was developed below the solar polar ice cap. So they were building their spaceships down in Antarctica. The same type that flew over Washington, D.C., and startled President Truman and the Pentagon in 1952. And I know some of them are now passed on, but many of the people got started in their interest in UFOs because of that dramatic flyover Washington, D.C. in
That was a
1952.
huge flap.
But according to the scientists with the Paperclip Project, those were German. They were German ships.
Yeah, well, you know, when you know, at the end of the war, there was that big race to go after the scientist, you know, the German scientist, you know, and of course, you know, doing some of my research and reading, you know, they were very surprised to see how far in technology the Germans were, you
They
know,
were very
you
far
know,
ahead of everybody.
you know, technology as far as engineering. I mean, first jet engine technology. You know, they were able to fly the first jet, a modern combat jet, rocketry. Of course, Werner von Braun was just, I mean, the guy was, he's basically the father of the Apollo missions,
Yeah.
you know? He really is, you know, it was a Nazi. No matter what, I mean, these guys were, you know, and a lot of people think that you know, this country went after him just for that knowledge, but also for the intelligence knowledge. You know, the Germans had a tremendous intelligence network. You know, you look at the Enigma machine. To this day, it's still top secret. To this day, World War II's been over for how long?
And it's still top secret, huh?
Still classified.
Well,
It's still classified. The Enigma machine. The code, you know, the code was cracked, but the way it structures the code, I believe.
they didn't want anybody to know that.
Correct. Correct. You know, in the intelligence services and that the Germans had, I mean, I'm pretty sure that modern day CIA has a lot of those, I believe, a lot of those techniques that they used, you know, from those services, from those intelligence services, you know. So there's a lot going on there. You know, Mary, going back and in your research, have you encountered anything as far as you believe that the Germans and Nazis used the dark arts to gain a lot of this knowledge?
Well, let me jump in with this. Doesn't directly answer your question, but it's on topic. This is Clark quoting von Braun. He said the Aryans from Aldebaran arrived on Earth many, many thousands of years ago, most recently in the early 90s. Now, this bothers me a lot, but anyhow, they were They were here assisting the German armies with weapons that were far ahead of those of the USA, Russia, and Japan. And then he also added that he'd seen real live ETs from Aldebaran. But that alone bothered me because I can't think of anything good that the Nazis were doing. So why would these ETs come in and help them? And that's one of those things I have in a box over here, hoping one day I will fully understand it, but right now I don't.
I will tell you this, and I got the same feelings as you as far as that concerned. But as far as the ET subject and the abduction phenomenon, which is one that a lot of people, they'll talk about the physical craft, but I also, have encountered many people who have had, the experiences where they've had some, they've been abducted, okay, or they've had missing time, okay, or that they have unknown scars in their bodies that they don't remember getting from childhood or
There's
from.
actually a ton of abduction stories out there.
Yes, yes,
I don't
and the
wanna sign up for
phenomenon.
any of those.
Yeah, and I wouldn't either. I would not either. And Mary, I'm in the camp, and that's as far as I'm concerned, that none of it's good. You know what I mean? If somebody's telling me that they're being taken while they're sleeping, okay, from their own bed, it's not good.
I
It's not good. I mean, at the end of the day, that's not good.
Now supposedly, and I've heard this or read it so many times or heard it so many times, supposedly President Eisenhower made a deal of swap technology for that particular race of ETs to abduct people but they were supposed to be limited to a certain amount.
Yes.
Nevertheless, I don't think that was a good deal.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's like making a deal with the devil, you know? And again, I go back to this disclosure, and it's funny how in none of it they talk about the abduction phenomenon, and they won't. Okay, because can you imagine the government? They'll never admit to that because the lawsuits will be flying like well tomorrow. It's just not. It's just one of these things. I go back to Stanton Friedman. When we had him over here at our conference many years ago, he said there's a reason why a lot of these things are a secret. There's a national security aspect, and he said to me, Willie, if I think if everything came out, people would not like what they're hearing.
I think it's much more complicated than we think. People think of a UFO that looks like this and gray aliens. There are many kinds of ETs out there. And just like on Earth, I think there's good ones and bad ones. There's strong indications that, there's actually a battle going on between, let's say, the white hats and the black hats for control of this planet. And if that's true, it gets really messy, and it would be very frightening to most people.
But yeah, I agree 100%. You have these people, jumping up and down. We're ready. We're ready.
I used to think people were ready, and now the more I learn of how complicated it is, I doubt that most people are really ready.
No, I get that one, Mary, because I used to have another opinion, many years ago, concerning this subject. I thought the same way, but as I gotten older, maybe just a
No, it's
tiny
not that
bit,
you've gotten older. We've
tiny
learned a
bit
lot
wiser.
more. We've learned a lot more, and
You
we
learn
have
a lot
reason to.
more.
We do learn, and
Yeah,
the more information you have, it like builds you up so you see further than you could when you were down here. So
correct.
it's not just age, it's just learning more.
Yeah,
And some people
correct.
learn very quickly and some of us don't.
Yeah, yeah. Someone the hard way,
Yes,
the hard way.
usually
But
remember those really well.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Mary, so we go back and we think about that and we go, you know what? Yeah, my opinion has changed on that. And I can see it has changed on you because last time we spoke, I believe um, we were on the same page as far as also, oh, we got to have this information out. We got to, all of a sudden, this information, what they're saying is trickling along and everybody's getting excited. But it's always the folks like us who are going, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced at all.
Well, I do think there's going to be continuing revelations this year and next year. I think we have chosen to be here at a time when things are at the brink of a major change. And whether we like it or not, I think it's coming at us.
Yes. But that I believe. That I believe it. At some point you can't keep those fingers on the dam. You know what I mean? You
And
just can't stop that.
and there are sources that the good ETs, I'll put it that way, are very disappointed with the way humans are not letting out the good information or not letting out the information. And so, from what I've pieced together, the ETs themselves are forcing our government to be more open about what they know. Now, they're not being real good about it, the government, but they're having conferences. They're now dripping out information. And it looks like maybe they're being forced to do that. It's like the ETs have told them, hey, we are going to do this by such and such a time. And if you don't want to look like fools, you better start getting stuff out there. That's me trying to talk like an ET. That doesn't work. But anyhow,
Yep. Mary, your opinion on what you've been seeing lately as far as these whistleblowers are concerned. You're seeing so many people coming out of the woodworks, claiming to be whistleblowers or, it's just, and a lot of them, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that we've gotten used to many, many years of seeing the same people. And now you're seeing a lot of this new generation coming in, and you see a lot of these people coming in just with a lot of claims. A lot of them have been out there and they've been exposed. Okay. And your thoughts on that?
give me a real specific question.
What do you think of these new people who are coming out with a lot of these claims?
A lot of the claims?
A lot of the claims that they worked for a certain part of the government or a lot of them have been coming out, which frustrates me. They say, oh, I had a security clearance. Oh, I can't talk about that.
Right.
They do all these claims where they, well, you're going to read it on my book. And it doesn't really say much, it's
I
like, oh,
know. And some of them have got to be telling the truth. And some of them may be actually people who are deliberately put out there to get people off the track.
yeah,
Disinformation has been done very deliberately forever. And the government has apparently been quite good at it.
yes. Yes, and it's been a little bit tougher this day and age, I believe, because of the onset of the social media is concerned, and it's just all over the place, just completely all over the place. And this is where it gets, I believe, you just say to yourself, man, it seems like an information overload. And when you start putting out this disclosure where it's coming out of everywhere, you just get tired of it. You just like, yeah, whatever.
There was one man who, I'm not going to use any names now, but there was one man who was coming across very authentically. And then I tripped on a video that his ex-girlfriend had made about how he was this and that and a phony and all that. So I'm going, is he telling the truth, or has this testimony been put out there to discredit him because he's telling the truth? How do you sort that out? It's nearly impossible.
Yes, you have to. You almost have to. You do a lot. You got to do a lot of these research on a lot of these people with these claims.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
do. And we're not always able to do that. We also have to depend on that gut feeling, because the gut feeling will, like, I've hesitated to do this or that, and later I'll find out why I was hesitating. I didn't know consciously, but something said, this isn't quite right. This isn't quite right. And then one day I figure out, I stumble on something which clearly makes it plain why I was getting that gut feeling.
correct. Well, the sixth sense are true. You know what I mean?
It does help protect us.
Yes, sixth sense is I say 99.9% right when it
Just
comes to
test it.
that.
Just do the opposite and you get confirmation real quickly, right?
Agreed. Agreed. And going back, Mary, this is the first time during my fourth episode right now that I've discussed this in length. This new disclosure has been coming out, which I've seen a lot of people jump in the bandwagon, jump up and down and say, oh, it's finally happening. And we're both back here just shaking our heads, people like you and I, just going, don't buy it.
I haven't done those on the website. Those things have been done in so many ways that I just don't want to repeat it again. So I'm not doing those things. I'm really trying to find information that I can confirm in some way or another, and
Correct.
not just repeat
Yeah.
everything that's out there.
And it's more relevant, just more relevant. I think I was talking to a good friend of mine who was saying that people are just getting almost fatigued with that, with the whole disclosure movement. Remember years ago, I'm not going to mention any names either, but there were people out there saying, well, Clinton is going to be the disclosure president. Hillary Clinton is going to be the disclosure president. It's going to be so and so. It's almost like those remote viewers, which I'm not going to mention names again, but these remote viewers that would say, this is going to happen on such a day when it's going to happen. I saw it. And that days go by and nothing
Happen.
happened. It does not happen. And you know what happens is, of course, you lose credibility. You know, I mean, it comes to the point where people don't want to listen to this anymore.
And we gotta try to do the best we can because there's still information that needs to get out there.
Correct. Relevant information. Yes. Yes, I agree.
And
Agree
we all have
100%.
our little pond where we can toss things out to the fish in our pond.
That's right. That's right. And that's what I try to do here. You know, I've always tried, you know, with these episodes, you know, with the show, is just go little by little, you know, and not follow these huge trends, you know, that everybody's following, you know, and having all these people who have not really shown anything, you know, it's been stuff that's just been regurgitated so many times, you know. But we start looking at it, you know, with a side eye, you know. You know, as far as I want to go back, Mary. As far as cashiers, has that still been pretty active?
To be quite honest, I wish we hadn't chosen that name, but at the time we were seeing so many UFOs over cashiers, that's what we named the website. But we've
Yes.
grown so far beyond that, but you don't change the name midstream. And we started this in
Well,
2008, and you can't change it. You know, just cannot do that.
that's what it's known for. That's what it's known for. You know,
I
it's
should
the
have had more
brand.
foresight when it came to the
It's the
naming of it.
brand. Oh, it's the brand. Oh, it's a known brand now.
So you got it. You pick Tide for a name, and that's the soap you're going to have.
That's right. It's just like mine. I'm stuck with this one. I'm stuck with this one. And this one was just a spur of the moment, you know. You know, because
I wanted to share something else with you. Clark McClellan was also friends with an astronaut named James Irwin, and
Yeah.
James Irwin was the lunar module pilot for the Apollo 15 mission. So
Yes.
he drove the first vehicle that we had on the moon. Clark must have recorded this, but these are the words of James Irwin that Clark recorded, and I think it's worth reading to you.
No, go right ahead.
He said, "Yes, Dave," and Dave was the Apollo 15 commander. "Yes, Dave and I observed several small whitish or metallic objects flying overhead. Whatever those things were, they had intelligence, performing tight angular dives, port and starboard sweeps above us. We heard no sound of thrust. They were very fast critters," this continues. "Yes, there were what we called lunar tracks on the surface, just like vehicle tracks, which was very strange because we had not been traveling there in the lunar rover before we made this visit. They were not made by any other craft of the USA or the USSR. It almost appeared as exploratory mining activities into the lunar surface, with a few that appeared as efforts to mine dig, so to speak. I also briefly saw what appeared to be structures in the far distance above and beyond the mountains of Hadley's Rill. Structures that appeared like glass or crystalline, high above the lunar horizon. I had a good view of whatever it was or is." And then Clark jumped in and he explained that James Irwin had taken 15 photos of these objects and stuff that he saw on the moon. And when they got back to Earth, the Department of Defense or NASA took the photos, and he
Yes.
never had access to them again. And the final little paragraph, "I was able to briefly view at least one of those photos supposedly showing those strange crystal structures. And to my complete amazement, none of those structures was shown on that specific photo. It was as if all on the horizon was erased and replaced."
You know, Mary, I want to ask you this, especially about the Apollo mission. Was you a believer that we did go to the moon?
Oh, yeah.
You know, so
I
am
do.
I. So
I
am
do.
I.
And a lot of people see on that photo that he was given, they had blacked out the horizon so it looked black. And some people, when they see those moonshots, they see that black horizon. They say it shouldn't look like that. Well, they probably have been, messed with. Another
so
thing that's
there's
just
been
popping into my head. There's a woman. Her name was last name was Hare, H-A, and her first name will come to me in a few minutes. She was an award-winning space illustrator and photographic technician for NASA. And she explained a whole lot of things, but one story will always stick in my head. She was in her office, and one of the people who worked there at NASA came in, and he had a big gash on his head. And she asked him about it. and he had been assigned the job of burning UFO photos. And there was a guard that was watching him. The man who got the gash took too long looking at these photos before he burned them, and the guard whacked him over the head. So they can get kind of mean and nasty if you do things you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that these agencies and these people are not able to hold a secret. Yes,
But
they
I
can.
can. If you scare everybody to death, you can keep a secret.
Yes, without a doubt, without a doubt. I'll never forget about. I was interviewed last week by a good friend of mine who has the paranormal the Chronicles, the Paranormal Chronicles. Gavin Davis. He was telling me, he goes, "Do you believe that Roswell happened?" And I go, "Yes." What happened in Roswell did happen. Okay, and a lot of the people were threatened there.
Mhm.
They were told not to talk about it, and to this, a lot of the people who were witnesses back then have passed away.
Correct.
Because this happened such a long time ago. But also the folks. I remember seeing this lady who, as a little girl, was threatened by a government agent, and he said, "Listen, if you talk
Wait.
about this."
Why was she threatened?
I believe because I think she was the daughter of the person who owned the funeral home.
Where the little creature
Yes.
was taken?
Yeah. Yes, and they told her, if you say anything, he pointed out to the back of her house, and it says that desert's very, very big, and they don't find anybody out there, and that stayed with her. I remember
Well, you
her
wouldn't
as an
forget
adult.
that.
I remember her as an adult talking about it, and she was crying. She was
Wow.
still upset. She was still upset at that threat.
Oh,
So that stayed with her. That it's almost like post-traumatic stress disorder.
I did a story with a woman that I got to know personally where I live, and her father worked at Wright Patterson.
Mhm.
And it's a very involved little story, but she and another little boy, they were just kids. And they found this piece of metal in their daddy's desk, and it was like magic. They could crumple it up and it would go like this. And so they took the metal and they started doing experiments with it. They put it in the oven. They did all sorts of things that any little kid might be able to imagine. And the magic metal always returned. I knew this woman for many years. She gave me a hint of this story. It took me years to get her to tell the story. And finally she did. But that's what an impact the fear has had on
Yes.
people.
Yes. Yes. And we're talking about a generation that's different from the generation now. I believe, you and I know that generation was very, I would say, patriotic.
Mhm.
Okay. And it was a different world.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
the way our government is now, we're not being given a reason to be patriotic.
no, no, not at all. Not at
No,
all. As a
not
matter
at
of
all.
fact, I was discussing this with somebody, and we were talking about the Adamus launching. Okay. And happened to sit down. Uh, and I was gonna watch the launch, and I'm going, "Oh wow, this is so cool! It's gonna go on live. It's today, and I can't wait to watch it." And I'm looking at the amount of people who are looking, and then I started switching from channel to channel. I didn't see a lot of networks carrying it. It was like
Old
it
news.
was yeah, exactly. And I'm saying this hasn't been done since this um, late '70s. Let's say some of the last Apollo missions were in the '70s, beginning of the '70s, I believe. And it was just like it wasn't big news, not the trend. You know what I mean? And, and I was watching some of the comments on the side because I was watching it on YouTube, and people were saying, "Oh, it's all fake." Is it even a real rocket?
Just
And it was
question everything, just everything.
correct, correct. And that's the type of world that we live in now.
Yeah.
You know.
One of the things I'll be posting on the website probably about a week from now it's basically my opinion on the Artemis astronauts. They
Hmm.
talk about the craters, they talk about meteorites, they talk about the great view of the Earth, just very bland subjects. And I think their arms are being twisted, just like has happened to astronauts in the past. And then I have brief statements by people with NASA who have been bold enough to tell the truth. And the contrast is incredible. So those astronauts saw, in fact, one of the people who worked at NASA said that every astronaut, every trip to the moon has been followed by ETs or by UFOs, every single one of them. And
Yes, I
this
do
was
believe.
a statement coming from a man who worked with the astronauts when they first land back on Earth. And so he would get the stories straight from the horse's mouth
Right,
as soon as the horse got out.
right. And I know that I know that some of these stories also about the Apollo missions and some of the ham operator radio that would pick up some of these transmissions,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where the astronauts were saying they were being followed. Okay.
Yep.
Also, the astronauts using their medical channel, which supposedly was their private channel,
Mm-hmm.
to communicate those, you know, report report in on that, because everybody was listening. A lot of people, that's one of the things that I say about the Apollo missions. I mean, I was just a little kid back then, but a lot of people seem to forget that there was a Cold War going on, and the Soviet Union was trying to up, the United States, and vice versa. So if we were faking this, if this country was faking this, the Soviet Union would have been very, very happy to just say, this is all a farce, this is all.
Didn't.
And they didn't, because
Talk about past memories. When I was a very young child, our neighbor, the father, had a big job at 3M, very scientific minded. So he brought all of us and got us up on the rooftop of the house. So here's a bunch of kids like birds on a wire with this man watching the sky, and we watched Sputnik fly over.
yes,
And Sputnik caused such a change in our whole school system. We suddenly had new math. We suddenly had all these new programs because it looked like the Russians were getting ahead of us.
yes, yes, yep. Seen a man-made object just circling around the planet, just going up.
At that
I
time,
mean,
it was a big deal.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, my son and I, we used to do it a lot. We'd go out to our backyard, and I pull out my binoculars, and we start looking out for satellites, and you see them traveling in that trajectory, they pretty much straight, and then they fade away, because the panels or whatever the switch on the from the sun, they just, but it's just a straight trajectory, and it's pretty cool, to see it, but I can't even imagine. And back then, just seeing that, and it just, like you said, and it probably inspired a lot of people also.
Mm-hmm.
It inspired a lot of people to jump into this program, and into this new wave of technology. And now it's like nothing, I mean, I mean, even watching a rocket that's going to be reused, like SpaceX, and their rockets. It's amazing to see that.
It is, and they come back and just turn around and land. So engineering wise, it's like miraculous. It truly is. But
Yeah.
I'm one of those people who really does believe that there are already astronauts on Mars. I do accept that from Hayam Rashid. And
The secret space program.
yeah, anyhow, I do believe
No,
that.
no. No, I believe it too. And I also believe there's been some missions even before Apollo that they were very secret, that they were able to get up. I think
You know
the
how I
Apollo
think they're getting
mission.
to the moon or to Mars now? They're either hitching a ride on a UFO with an ET or they're teleporting there. There's no way that we're going to be sitting around waiting for rocket technology to get us to Mars. That's just not the way it's going to
Yeah,
work.
who was the young man in England who broke into a Pentagon computer and basically saw a manifesto of a space fleet, it was like a naval fleet, that was in space, and they went after this guy. I mean, the government wanted him really, really bad, and he was just a young kid. He had just broken into one of the Pentagon computers, hacked into it, and he said he basically saw ship to ship, what looked like ship to ship transfers, you know but they went from here, they were all, it is, it almost sounds unbelievable,
Right.
but I tell you, there's too many people who are really have, we're not the only ones that have been talking about it, and again, I go back to these whistleblowers. They come out, they share their stories. At times, I think, like you said, they let them out to either it's going to be a disinformation, or maybe the government's saying, let's throw them a bone. Maybe this will shut them up for a little bit.
A mixture of truth with untruth is probably the most dangerous form of propaganda.
I agree 100%. And a lot of the times, what it does is divide us. Also, you have different camps. You know what I mean? And And there's a lot of people out there that really just want to. That's what they want to hear. Mary. They want to hear these these outrageous claims. They do. I mean, they have a thirst for it. And unfortunately, they don't do enough research. And there's so much propaganda and this what we call the internet. And social media.
It also
You know,
gives us access to information we never would have been able to access before. I remember all the
correct.
efforts it used to take to get to the library to, dig up and find these things. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's like Google. Google is good and bad, or Google
That's
Earth
right.
is good and bad.
It's like a
Internet
double
is
edged
good and
sword.
bad, and we just have to be very cautious.
Yep. Yeah, it's like a double edged sword. It's gonna
Mhm.
cut both
Yep.
sides. It really is. As I admire people like the old investigators, Denton Friedman. They had to go out there and actually write these freedom for information. One time I heard him talking about it where he said, "You really got to know how to write these. I mean, there's a way of writing them. There's a way of writing the request, and if you don't write it
You don't
in a
get
certain
you
way,
don't get
you don't get through. It's like applying for grants. I know a lot of people in the city who apply for grants, and they gotta.
there's a format for that. I learned that
Yes,
because I read one of them. I thought, "This is really boring." And I thought you could present this in such a better way, but then I found out you have to plug it into this format, and it forces it to become very dull.
yes, yes, and you have to really know what you're doing, and you have to follow that structure. It must be one of these government part of the bureaucracy, right? Part of it are not making it easy for the citizen like you and I to gain this information. You know, they're not going
Anyhow,
to make
we're
it
both
easy.
trying, and I'm proud of both of us, and we just keep on doing the best we can, and
That's right.
that's
That's
that's it's
right.
important.
That's
We
right.
gotta keep trying to do it.
That's right. Well, Mary, I want to get that book, so I want to purchase the book. I'm going to go to the
I
website.
will send you one if you'll just make sure I have your mailing address.
Yes, yes, because the Looking Glass one, I
The one that's
believe.
called Spy in the Sky, and if anybody else wants it, it's only $16. I mean, I'm not making money off of it because between the printing and the shipping, there's no money being made here, but I want that information out. And so go to skyshipsovercashiers.com. Cashiers is like a cashier at the grocery store. Open up Editor's Corner right at the top. It'll tell you how to get the book. But you make sure you send me your address.
Oh no, I will. I will. I will. Fantastic. Oh my God, I've had such a pleasure, and thank you so much, Mary. And you have a blessed weekend. Okay, take care now. Bye bye.
Welcome to the Paradigm Matrix with your host, Willie Miranda. This has been the Paradigm Matrix hosted by Willie Miranda.